everyone, welcome to my presentation on membrane transport. Today we're going to talk about what it is, the types, and how they each work. So, what is membrane transport? Membrane transport is a mechanism for moving substances across the cell membrane, and it is categorized by active and passive transport. Active transport being one that requires ATP or energy, and passive transport which does not require ATP. So the 5 types are filtration, simple diffusion, osmosis, carrier-mediated transport, which is facilitated diffusion and active transport, and vesicle transport, which is endocytosis and exocytosis. The ones that do not require ATP or are passive are filtration, simple diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. The ones that do require ATP are active transport, vesicle transport, both endocytosis and exocytosis. First, we're going to talk about filtration. It uses hydrostatic pressure to move particles. So, in a blood cavity, when pressure is added, particles, smaller in size, are pushed out of the molecular walls. Next is simple diffusion. Simple diffusion moves particles from areas of high concentration to low concentration. This being the bilayer of phospholipids. Now we have a layer of high concentration and low concentration on each side. This one will push particles from high concentration to low concentration, which will then balance between the membranes. Next is osmosis. This is the same thing as simple diffusion. However, it only moves water from areas of high water concentration to low concentration. So this one's the same thing, just with water. Next, we have carrier-mediated transport. Carrier-mediated transport is movement through a membrane that requires a transmembrane protein. Now we have 2 types. We have facilitated diffusion and active transport. Facilitated diffusion moves particles from an area of high concentration to low concentration through a transmembrane protein without the use of ATP. So as we can see, it takes a particle from high concentration, moves it through that transmembrane protein to the side with low concentration. Now, active transport. Active transport is movement from areas of low concentration to high concentration through that transmembrane protein, and this does require the use of ATP. A good example of why this would require energy is if you were pushing through a heavy crowd versus walking through a normal grocery store. Now, it's a lot more difficult to walk through a crowd, let's say at a concert, than it is to walk through a grocery store. Depending if maybe it's Walmart and that's chaotic, but let's say it's not Walmart and it's a heavy crowd. This requires a lot more use, which is why this requires energy. So as you can see, it's taking a particle from low concentration and moving it to high concentration, and it requires energy, that ATP. Now our last example is vesicular transport. Vesicular transport is transportation of large molecules across a membrane in packages or vesicles, which is why it's called vesicle transport. So as you can see, that membrane, as particles approach, or those large molecules approach that membrane, the membrane will begin to form around it, almost creating a bubble, and officially closing off and moving those particles inside the membrane. Now this is called endocytosis. And the opposite of that is exocytosis, which is when that bubble will approach the membrane wall from the inside. It'll open back up and push those particles back out. Exocytosis. Both of these requiring energy. That sums up my presentation. Thanks for listening.